In the chaotic land of Atlatan, life is basically a disaster waiting to happen. People can only survive under the protection of lords who wield magical crests to keep the chaos at bay. Instead of sticking to their whole protect the people job description, the lords decides for a non-stop war, swiping crests from one another to become the ultimate powerhouses. Siluca comes in, a sharp-tongued mage who is completely over the lords and their nonsense. Then there's Theo, a wandering knight with big dreams of kicking the tyrants out of his homeland and bringing peace to his people. Together, this unlikely duo teams up to fix the hot mess that is Atlatan. Along the way, they'll face greedy lords, chaos-fueled disasters, and plenty of battles. It's a wild ride, but hey, someone's got to clean up the war-torn mess. The story kicks off with Siluca rushing to a grand church to deliver the congratulatory speech at the highly anticipated wedding of Alexis and Marine. This isn't just any wedding, it's supposed to bring peace to the warring factions of Atlatan by merging their crests to create the Grancrest, a magical seal that promises to end the chaos. Siluca senses a chaos convergence brewing, but before she can stop it, her path is blocked by Irvin, a mysterious swordsman. A demon lord crashes the wedding, blocking Matthias and Sylvester, the two faction leaders. In a dimensional barrier, the two attempt to merge their crests into the Grancrest to banish the demon, but their efforts fail miserably. The demon lord wipes them out. The Grancrest is shattered before it's even formed, and the peace everyone dreamed of dies with them. The wedding disaster, later known as the Great Hall Tragedy, plunges Atlatan into even deeper chaos, splitting it into two factions locked in endless war. Fast forward to the present, and we find Siluca en route to meet her new employer, Count Villar. She's not thrilled about the assignment. She thinks Villar chooses mages based on their looks rather than their skills. Irvin, now acting as her escort to atone for his role in the wedding tragedy, keeps quiet as they ride. Their peaceful journey is interrupted by a group of soldiers who attack their carriage, violating the sacred rules against harming mages before their contracts are finalized. Siluca prepares to defend herself, but just as things are about to get ugly, a lone swordsman named Theo rides in. Theo tries to talk the soldiers down, but quickly realizes diplomacy won't work with his trusty sword and the power of his crest. Theo drives the soldiers away. As he and Siluca chat, he explains his dream to save his hometown, Sistina, from the tyranny of Lord Rossini and the rampant chaos breeding demons. He plans to raise the power of his crest and free his people. Siluca, impressed by his determination, but blunt about his shortcomings, decides to help him. In true Siluca fashion, her help is anything but conventional. She summons a chaos beast named Tartarus and challenges Theo to defeat it. If he succeeds, he'll absorb its core and rank up to knight. Though hesitant, because who wouldn't be? Theo takes on the beast. After a tough fight, he kills it, levels up, and gains a knight's crest. Taking advantage of the moment, Siluca forms a mage contract with Theo, officially making them a team. Meanwhile, Lord Mesmedric, a nearby noble, is furious about Theo's rise. He dismisses warnings from his retainer Saturus about the risks of interfering with mages and soldiers alike. When Theo, Siluca, and Irvin show up at his castle, demanding Mest surrender his crest and lands, he laughs in their faces until Saturus switches sides and pledges loyalty to Theo. Irvin disarms Mest with ease, and Theo takes the opportunity to claim Mest's crest and castle, forcing the disgraced lord into exile. With his first victory under his belt, Theo begins to take his first real steps toward his dream. Siluca announces their next move, joining the Union to gain the political and military support needed to topple Rossini. Though Theo doubts he'll survive long enough to see his dream realized, Siluca's unwavering determination keeps him moving forward. David gets wind of Theo's recent glow-up, acquiring Lord Mest's crest, castle, and even joining the Union. His subordinate, Moreno, watches as David gleefully cooks up a plan to attack Theo, completely ignoring the political blowback from other lords. Meanwhile, at Theo's castle, Siluca updates him on the state of his new domain. The 3 villages under his rule have begrudgingly acknowledged him as their new lord. But there's a catch. They're drowning in taxes from the previous administration. Theo, ever the reluctant leader, starts questioning his life choices. He just wanted to help his small hometown, not become the boss of this mess. Siluca, ever pragmatic, reminds him that abandoning his village doesn't exactly scream hero, and that he needs to toughen up if he plans to save it later. Theo takes her words in stride, though he's not thrilled by her no-nonsense delivery. Later, in her quarters, Siluca strategizes with Irvin about the inevitable showdown with nearby lords. They figure Lassic David, a military powerhouse with a penchant for hiring mercenaries, will be their first opponent, while Irvin suggests hiring mercenaries of their own. Siluca has a better idea. Call in her very eccentric friend, Aishala. She sends her cat familiar, Sir Balgri, on the mission, promising a mountain of treats upon his return. The grumpy cat reluctantly agrees, vanishing in a puff of fur and sass. That evening, Siluca and Theo chat about her reasons for ditching her original lord. Turns out, she has zero tolerance for shady nobles and only respects those with genuine ideals, like Theo's dreams of justice. She assures Theo that as long as he stays true to himself, she'll have his back. Theo, inspired, vows to rely on her guidance. The next morning, David and his 50 soldiers, plus 5 mercenaries, arrive at Theo's castle. Siluca, brimming with confidence, tells Theo to stay put. She and the newly arrived Aishala have it under control. Aishala, a whirlwind of chaos wrapped in a deadly smile. smile, immediately warns Theo to behave or face her wrath. She picks out a weapon with an unsettling level of excitement, ready for battle. As David's forces charge, Siluca deploys a flawless strategy. Irvin takes the right flank, Aishella the center, and she handles the left. Siluca traps soldiers in earthen walls and zaps them unconscious with thunder magic. But Moreno, David's mage and Siluca's old acquaintance, takes her on in a duel. Their battle is intense, with Moreno hoping to use her as leverage, but Siluca holds her own with defensive spells. On the front lines, Aishella terrifies her enemies into retreat, even trapping their leader, Peter, with a seductive kiss before chaos ensues. Irvin, meanwhile, surgically dismantles his opponents until he faces Captain Gluck, a human tank with steel-like skin. Irvin uses his trademark precision to target Gluck's vulnerable eye, ending the fight in one brutal move. Back at the Siluca-Moreno standoff, Theo swoops in to relieve Siluca and takes on Moreno himself. After a heated exchange, Theo lands a decisive blow, wounding Moreno and tipping the scales in their favor. Meanwhile, Irvin nearly faces off with David, but Theo steps in with captured Moreno, forcing David to surrender. By nightfall, David kneels before Theo, pledging loyalty in the hopes of future conquests. Theo accepts and absorbs David's crest, leveling up to the rank of Baron. An emissary named Priscilla Farnese, along with her entourage from the Order of the Crest, rolls up to Theo's castle, hoping to join his growing cause. Siluca isn't exactly thrilled about this development. She heard whispers that the Order has a nasty habit of borrowing crests from lords, and by borrowing, she means stealing. Naturally, she tries to convince Theo to politely tell them to scram, but Theo, being Theo, welcomes them with open arms. Siluca's annoyance is practically palpable. At dinner, David wastes no time puffing up Theo's accomplishments, bragging about how the local lords are either surrendering to or joining Theo's camp. Moreno chimes in, calling their win over Lord Neiman a masterstroke, with Western Civis basically under Theo's banner. David boldly suggests that Theo is well on his way to becoming king, but Siluca hits the brakes on this hype train, explaining that Theo has no such lofty goals. His real plan is to gain control of a Union territory before strategically switching sides to the Alliance. It's all part of her grand vision, which she conveniently neglected to share with Theo until now. Now that Theo's a baron, Siluca gifts him the surname Cornaro. It's the same name as a legendary hero from Sistina who unified the island and conquered demon territories before being tragically betrayed by the Rossinis. Theo, eager to throw some historical shade at his enemies, gladly accepts the name. Meanwhile, Siluca sends Moreno to negotiate with Viscount Neville, the so-called king of Civis, hoping he'll officially recognize Theo's independence. As Siluca waits for news from Moreno, she hears from Sartoris that the king of Clovis is willing to recognize Theo's independence as long as he keeps to himself and doesn't cause trouble. Before she can celebrate, Irvin appears out of nowhere with urgent news. A chaos hazard has erupted near the castle. At the hazard site, things are a mess. A coal explosion has left one worker infected by chaos, while fires rage out of control. As Theo tries to douse the flames, a salamander chaos beast emerges, and Theo's attempts to fight it prove utterly useless. Siluca calls in Aishella, who engages the beast head-on, while Theo and Irvin focus on evacuating the townsfolk. Meanwhile, Priscilla shows off her healing skills, tending to the infected worker, while Siluca summons water from a well to take down the salamander. But defeating the beast comes at a price. Its body explodes, causing massive damage to the town. Siluca quickly erects a barrier to protect Priscilla and the worker, while Theo shields her from the worst of the blast. It's a chaotic victory, but a victory nonetheless. The next morning, Siluca wakes up to Aishella by her bedside. Ignoring her own fatigue, she rushes to check on Theo, who's already chatting with townsfolk despite his injuries. Seeing the damage he sustained, Siluca tends to his wounds and apologizes for her mistakes during the salamander fight. She thanks Theo for protecting her, and Theo reassures her, expressing his gratitude for her support and affirming that he'll continue to rely on her. This heartwarming moment leaves Siluca determined to keep pushing forward with Theo. She mentions they'll need to negotiate with the Alliance soon, and names her former mentor, Obest Melitz, as the likely person they'll deal with. Theo trusts her judgment, as always, and the two steel themselves for the challenges ahead. The next day, the battle begins. Despite their smaller numbers, Theo's forces gain the upper hand through superior strategy and sheer determination. Midway through the fight, reinforcements from the Free Lords join Theo's side. The Free Lords reveal that they defected after learning of the King of Civis's plan to strip them of their crests. Overwhelmed, the King of Civis retreats in disgrace, vowing revenge for his humiliating defeat. Theo emerges victorious, solidifying his reputation as a rising force to be reckoned with. Following the battle, Siluca travels to meet Maureen Kreischa, a key player in the Alliance. As an envoy, Siluca proposes an alliance, and Maureen agrees to consider. With this tentative progress, Siluca returns to Theo's side. Albest wasn't thrilled about the idea of Theo cozying up to the Alliance. In his eyes, this wasn't just a bold move, it was a recipe for chaos. If Theo joined the Alliance, alliance, it'd inspire other lords to do the same, and Marine would have no choice but to retaliate, dragging Siluca into the mess too. When someone dared to ask if Obest was really okay with fighting his own adopted daughter, he shrugged and basically said, "Yeah, no big deal." Later, Obest delivered the bad news to Siluca. Her proposal was flat out rejected. Oh, and by the way, Theo needed to pack his bags, give up his title, and leave Seavis immediately. If they didn't comply, the Waldland Order of Knights would roll in with King Savis's army and wreck everything. Siluca, of course, didn't back down. Instead, she promised they'd settle this disagreement on the battlefield. The next day, Siluca, Aishella, and their trusty cat familiar Sir Balgry hopped into a carriage headed for Vilar Constance's place. Aishella spent most of the trip complaining about their dad's blunt rejection and the fact that they had to go crawling to Vilar for help. But when they arrived, Vilar was nowhere to be seen. Instead, Siluca was greeted by his mage, Margaret, who wasn't in the mood to play nice. Margaret turned down Siluca's alliance pitch fast. Back at Theo's castle, the mood was grim. The Waldland Order of Knights, along with King Savis's forces, were preparing to attack. Outnumbered and outgunned, Theo and his crew had to think smart. They planned a desperate defense. Lassic would hold the west gate, Nayman the east gate, and Aishilla the south. If things went south, they hoped their bravery might earn them some favorable terms. The victory came at a cost. Nayman had fallen, and Lassic was nowhere to be found, until word arrived that he was fighting King Savis himself in the mountains. Lassic, the absolute madman, used the narrow road to his advantage and took down Savis in one-on-one combat. The king's forces tried to retreat, but were ambushed by Gluck, Irvin, and an archer, making it a full-blown rout. With Savis dead, it was time for peace talks, or so they thought. Negotiations hit a major snag. Albest refused to accept a deal unless Theo was dead. No compromises, no exceptions. The fallout left Theo's allies furious, but Theo, he was oddly at peace, proud of how far they'd come in their quest. Meanwhile, Obest and Marine huddled up to plot their next moves. The next morning, a small enemy force led by Obest and Marine marched toward Theo's castle, ready to finish the job. Siluca noticed Vilar's earlier refusal to help had a key caveat at that time. Sure enough, Vilar and his army showed up in dramatic fashion, forcing Marine's forces into a full retreat. Back at the castle, Irvin confirmed the enemy's withdrawal, and Vilar made a surprise appearance. Siluca tried to apologize for her previous attitude toward him, but Vilar waved it off, smugly satisfied with how things had played out. Instead of claiming the throne, Theo shocked everyone by asking to become Vilar's vassal. Vilar, amused but indifferent, accepted. With everything settled, Theo officially handed over his lands and title to Lassic. Priscilla, ever loyal, vowed to keep following Theo. At the Vampire King's castle, tensions are high as the Vampire King and the Werewolf Queen exchange a few icy words. Their little spat is interrupted by Yana, a descendant of the Black Witch, who clearly has no time for the Werewolf Queen's noble attitude. Outside the castle, the Queen's daughters, Emma and Luna, are waiting patiently when Yana shows up for some ominous small talk. Meanwhile, back in Alturk, Theo is officially knighted as a guard knight by Count Vilar. Siluca introduces him to three mages, Laura, Helga, and Colleen. During the ceremony, word arrives that Prince Milza Kuches of Dartania is on his way for a visit. At dinner, things start with polite talk about who might become the next emperor. That is until Milza turns his gaze on Theo, calling him out for his lack of ambition. Vilar quickly shifts the conversation to Lassic and his recent conquests, sparing Theo from more jabs. Later, in the castle library, Theo is dusting books while Siluca dives into one about the Demon Lord. She learns that witches, werewolves, and vampires once fought side by side against demon forces in Alturk. Theo, feeling a little overwhelmed by how grand the Constance clan is compared to his own meager lands, takes it all in stride. Their musings are interrupted when Laura calls them to the throne room, where they're introduced to Zelma, a witch. Vilar gives them a new mission: figure out why hordes of werewolves are heading to the Forest of Eternal Darkness. In the forest, the werewolves are tracking Emma and Luna, but are met by Yana, flying on her broomstick like it's casual Friday. Yana asks the Werewolf Queen to stand down, and surprisingly, the Queen agrees. At dusk, Theo and Siluca ride into the forest and encounter the werewolf clan. Theo tries to reason with them, but the wolves aren't exactly keen on diplomacy. Luckily, the Vampire King's shadow intervenes, granting Theo and Siluca safe passage. Inside the Vampire King's castle, they find Dimitri playing the organ like he's auditioning for a gothic opera. Deep below, Yana has taken the Werewolf Queen's daughters hostage, and the Queen is in a brutal fight, losing her arm in the process. Dimitri, meanwhile, drops some bombshells. He wants to bring back the Dark Ages, stop the Grancrest fusion, and avoid his ultimate doom. When Theo asks if Dimitri was behind the infamous wedding attack, Dimitri gets cagey and exits stage left, transforming into a flock of bats. In the castle's basement, Theo and Siluca find Yana taunting the severely injured Werewolf Queen. When Yana learns Dimitri has abandoned her, she goes full unhinged villain and starts attacking. Meanwhile, the Queen transforms into a wolf and rescues her daughters. Yana tries to recapture them, unleashing gargoyles, but the Queen fights them off, taking one last stand to protect her daughters. The Queen claws Yana's leg, but is mortally wounded in return. As Yana flees, Siluca attempts to stop her, but Yana escapes. The twins embrace their mother one last time before she succumbs to her injuries. That's the end of the recap. Let us know if you want part 2 by leaving a comment in the comment section down below. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel to avoid being virgin forever. See you guys in the next video.